All right, guys.
We're live.
We're live with episode 19.
Lucky number 19.
All right.
Jeff and Brian, the authors of the Tier 1 series. So thank you guys for coming in today. Really appreciate it.
Oh, anytime, man. Thanks for having us.
I feel like, we're like starting to become kind of a deal. Not a big deal, but a deal. that like I have PR reps contacting me like, can we get our authors on your show? I'm like, wow, really? Like we're just, me and Dave like in a basement dungeon in Brooklyn. And now we have like, I feel there's a
Publicists are contacting.
There's a level of legitimacy.
So now you know who to blame.
Yeah.
Poppy.
Yes.
Poppy.
She's been really good. You guys are lucky. Like it's hard to find a PR agent that like goes and works for you.
Yeah.
As I've come to find out. So you guys are lucky. There's somebody out there hustling for you. That's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's awesome. And let's show off the books first of all, and then we'll talk a little bit about your guys' background and how you met and how you got into all of this. You want to hold those?
I do.
Up, Dave? Everyone, grab one and hold them up. Which one's? It's that.
This is
the latest one.
First one.
This is the first one.
Yep.
Tier 1.
Yep.
That's book 1. This is book 2, War Shadows. Book 3, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Book 4 is American Operator, and just out a few weeks ago, Red Spectre.
Red Spectre. You guys have rave reviews on Amazon. Like
thanks.
People are loving your books and very compelling. Like the way you write. So Jack, so why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves, like your backgrounds and before you even started writing, or maybe you've always written, but
And our journey to writing is a little different. The two of us, what we share in common is the military, both Navy. I was actually in and out of the Navy. I was originally slated for aviation and got in a motorcycle accident, so that didn't work out. And I flew as a civilian pilot for a few years. Then I worked for another government agency for about 2 years, and after that experience, I was like, maybe there's a more peaceful way to live. It's, it was before 9/11. There wasn't all, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It was just, the violence of it was, I just was ready for a break. And so I went the full other way and I went to medical school. So I went to medical school and my plan was to become an academic teaching surgeon, right? I was going to be at a university and do research. So I was in my training I was just finishing general surgery, was going to start a vascular surgery fellowship when those jackasses crashed the planes into the towers. And
just when I thought
I was out.
They pull me back in.
like all of it, like nothing special about my story. Like America in general just rallied, right? From all corners, everybody was like, they wanted to, and I felt the same way. So I was still in the reserves at that time, and I contacted the active duty recruiter and I said, I want to transition to active duty. He's like, oh, you want to mobilize? I said, no, I don't want to be a mobilized reservist. I want to go on active duty. Like, this is what I'm going to do. So they worked that out, but then they made me finish my fellowship. And I went to Portsmouth in 2004 and immediately deployed with Marines as a FRIS team surgeon with 2MEF. And while I was downrange, I ran into some people I knew from my prior life, and one thing kind of led to another, and the next thing I knew I was working with Naval Special Warfare as a combat surgeon, developing some austere environment stuff for them. So did that for a number of years, and here we are.
This is and I mean, feel free to jump in here, but I mean, were you part of that surgical unit that like they would actually take out on target to operate on dudes if they needed it?
We're talking about with the Marines or with NSW?
With JSOC, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I deployed with an East Coast based SEAL team, and that's what we did. Yeah. So when they had a small package, it was going to be somewhere that was austere, that could be some time to get out of there. The model was, as you guys know, there are some units that do that stuff, but they have a very large footprint.
Right.
So the SEAL team that I was working with, they were looking for something smaller in footprint. They couldn't get any smaller than me and another dude. So that's what we did. We trained up this package that was just me and another dude.
Really? Yeah. So you guys, I mean, how does that work as far as the medical package that you're augmenting these guys? I mean, can you do brain surgery on target if you had to? I mean,
first of all, probably not brain surgery, but you can, if you need brain surgery, you're screwed. But you'd be amazed. First of all, you'd be amazed what can be done. But you'd also be amazed, this is the best part of this story, is you'd be amazed what a good 18 Delta can do. So you don't really need a surgeon to be there every minute of every day. I was glad I got to be. I was, excited for the training that they gave me, and it was nice to be part of these small units and go out and do stuff. But I was amazed if you put confidence in a guy and you invest in training. These guys, special forces guys, whether it's Army, Navy, these are the brightest guys. These guys, by the time they get to that level, JSOC aside, if you're operating at that level as an operator, you could have gotten a PhD.
Yeah.
It would have been a little easier, right? So they're not dumb guys. These are super intelligent,
Our
highly
medics are super.
So,
no, I'm talking about the operators. You're being self-depreciating. The operators too. I mean, well, there's a couple. I know there's a few that maybe not, but there's really nothing else they could do.
I was an 18 Bravo, so forget it.
So for our audience who is not familiar with the Special Operations community, 18 Delta is the medical course that Green Beret SEALs. It's a long course where they learn. It's almost a PA school.
Well, I agree with that.
It's almost a PA school.
It's way more than a medic.
Yeah, it's almost a physician's assistant school. And
I don't want to go far too down into the weeds, but like the 18 Delta is specifically the Special Forces.
Right,
MOS.
that's the MOS.
So like SOCM, the Special Operations Medical Course. They send SEALs to that.
Right.
They sent PJs go to that.
PJs.
Yeah.
But
SEALs,
that's mostly a trauma school, though.
Yes.
So
Yes.
Well, it's the whole
trauma
school.
medicine.
It's a long.
But you're talking about
But
people who've been
the
through the long
SF guys
course.
get the dental and veterinary and how to stop
preventive medicine.
how to stop a malaria outbreak.
Right. How to sanitize. How to sanitize a well.
What are you talking about?
That's the Army.
So that's what an 18 Delta is. When we're talking about an 18 Delta, somebody with some very advanced medical training that, they're operating at a very high level of knowledge and skill.
And to take a guy like that's already so highly trained and take him one more level up. So we could take an 18 Delta, especially in this unit where you really have the best of the best, and you can make him into your anesthesiologist. He doesn't have to go to med school and anesthesia school.
Right.
Just, hey, here's how the drugs work. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm trivializing it and joking a little bit, but it's not far removed from that. And so these guys are incredibly impressive.
Yeah.
What I did was not that amazing. What I did was be around some amazing guys and had the opportunity to share my knowledge so that they could do amazing stuff. And it was amazing what these folks can do.
It's funny.
Incredible.
It's funny because I think I told you that I was a dive med tech in the Navy, and one of the challenges with being a medic or a corpsman or anything, even at a basic level, is that you come out of the military and you're basically overtrained and underqualified. The stuff that you do in the military, you're not allowed to do in a civilian context. Under, you'd have to get like a.
Oh yeah.
So it's
Well, it's funny, and I don't want to go too far off this because Brian has a more interesting story than I do, but that was actually that really upset me when I found out that these guys they'd go to 18 Delta school and they get advanced training with me, and I had a guy operate on somebody in Somalia, or actually in Ethiopia, but that's another story.
That's neither here nor there.
There.
We're splitting hairs. Splitting hairs.
And there was no one else there, and he the things these guys can do, and then they get out of the service, and the best job they can do is be an EMT.
Or an LVN, an LPN, a licensed
at the
vocational
most.
nurse.
And these guys are better trained than many PAs and nurse practitioners out there, and there's no certification that allows them to challenge the exam, and that's what we fought for was in Florida and Virginia. Let's let these. If you think these guys can't do it, then prove it. Let them take the test, the practical and the written exam, and if they can't pass it, then great. Make them go to the school for 2 years.
Yeah.
But if they blow your socks off and they're 99th percentile, like I predict they will be, then certify them and let them get to work.
Yeah.
But they never went.
As the kids say these days, they're hella trained.
Yeah.
So.
Nice.
And Brian, you were a submariner.
Yes, I was a submariner.
So he's the big brain in the room.
Right.
But you were a surgeon, and you're not allowed to say that.
Oh no, but you have very many submariners.
A few.
They all they're like.
So
No, they're brainiacs.
That's why they call us bubbleheads.
That's right. They're brainiacs,
Right.
man.
So what was your trajectory then in coming into the Navy and going down that road?
Sure. So I was a ROTC guy. I went to Vanderbilt. So I was there, and when I got there, the nice thing about the Navy ROTC program, if you're there on scholarship, is they let you pick your major, so you can sort of go into whatever you want. So I got to Vanderbilt. I'm looking around, like, where are the best looking girls? Like, what building are they going into?
Psychology.
Psychology. They're all going to Wilson Hall, a psychology building.
No big deal.
That's where I said I'm going to take classes there. So I got into psychology, and then once you start studying the brain, it's pretty fucking cool. So I actually got into cognitive psychology, and I was doing some undergraduate research on how words and pictures, like, I don't know if you've ever been curious, but like it is sort of strange that you can see a picture of a dog, and I can say the word dog, so the dog semantically accesses somehow this same construct as a picture, which is nothing similar. So I started getting into that and doing some...
Isn't that semiotics?
Semantics. You have the semantic meaning, and then you have this...
Where it's like red is associated with hot and blue is associated with cold, but there's no
so there's this
real
whole
reason why.
There's this whole associative priming thing that goes on in the brain. So like, strangely, if you do a test, they'll do simple decision-making tests and psychology experiments. They might have you... They're telling you that the test is... We just want you to identify whether this is an animate or inanimate object. You're just going to hit a keyboard yes or no. So the person taking the test just thinks that if they see a picture of a dog, they say, yes, that's animate. They see a picture of a screw, and they say, no, that's inanimate. And they're doing hundreds of trials, and they just think that that's what they're doing. But the researchers, what they're really looking at is saying, okay, it's how the test is structured. So we would structure a test. I'd say, okay, I know cat and dog are highly semantically related. You have these tables where you'll have people say, I'll say to you, Jack, what's the first word that comes to mind when I say dog? Well, 57% of the population will say cat, and the next people will say fur, and then bark. And it sort of is this slope of percentage. And so what you find is when you precede the word cat with dog on this simple decision-making test, they're actually faster, like several milliseconds faster, hitting the key just by it being preceded by dog. So
primed.
It's primed. It's primed. Your brain has all these concepts that are linked, and so this activation spreads in the brain. It primes your response, so you're actually faster. So that was sort of what had my head in. I'm doing this, and I thought, all along I'm thinking, I'm going to go into Navy intelligence. Like, that's where I'm going to go. And my senior year, they pull us all into a room. And they're like, sorry, fellas, it looks like they're closing all the restricted line communities for your senior year, so you got to go, SWO or subs or Marines or aviation. That's your choice.
The big branches, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
They needed guys in
Line service.
Yeah.
They needed that. All unrestricted.
Yeah,
line.
SWO is surface warfare officer, and then submarines, and you said
Marines.
Aviation, Marines.
Yeah.
Special warfare.
Yeah.
Yeah, no psychology major.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to that. You think I can run a 5-minute mile? Are you crazy? I'm not gonna do that.
You're a Vanderbilt.
I don't run. People that do that for me. So then I said, well, I had been on a midshipman cruise on a destroyer, and I did one on an oiler, and I said, I don't think I want to go SWO. No disrespect to our SWO friends, but I didn't want to do that, and wasn't about to do Marines, and we were joking I probably wouldn't have made it special warfare. So I said, well, to my unit CO, I said, well, I think I'm going to go submarines. He just laughed. He just laughed in my face. He's like, you're a psychology major. You haven't taken any engineering classes. And I said, well, how hard can it be? He's like, really hard. Everyone else who's applying is an engineer. Did you take electrical engineering? No. Did you take mechanical? No. Thermal? No. Material science? No. Chemistry? No. So I was like, well, let's try to just gouge me up.
So don't let him self-depreciate too much. I don't brag on him for a minute, which I don't do because I actually don't care for him. But, the true part of this story is these guys told him, no, you can't be a submariner because you're not an engineer. And he said, well, there must be some way. They're like, you wouldn't even pass the test.
There must be a loophole.
And he goes, oh, there's a test. They said, yeah, there's a test, and you will fail it because you've not taken any of these classes that we just described. He goes, but if I were to pass it, then I could be on submarines. And they said, yeah, if you pass it, you can be on submarines. So he went out and bought $1,000 worth of books and spent 6 weeks cramming, and he's got such a big brain, he was able to absorb an engineering degree in 6 weeks and had one of the highest scores on the test, so they had to let him be a submariner. Can you believe
I
that?
think I had probably just barely passed the score. But
it's the most ridiculous story ever.
That's incredible.
And yet it's true.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so they let me in.
And now I have to talk to him.
So you're a quick learner.
Yeah, so I learned that stuff, and then they sent me down nuclear power school, and eventually made it out, and I was on a fast boat out of Pearl, So that was fun.
Doing the super secret squirrel stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like hunting for Russian subs, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we did that sort of stuff. We did reconnaissance. We did battle group escort. And we did coastal surveillance. We did
A lot of ISR stuff.
Yeah. And our boat was the first salvo. I wasn't on at the time, but it was the first salvo launched in Gulf War I. Tomahawks flew from my boat.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
How did you find submarine life? Because I know it's tough. You know, you're talking about a ship's company or boat, I guess, boat's company of people like crammed into a very small space. So how did you adapt to that, and what did you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. A lot of people say, are you claustrophobic? That's the first question I typically get. Are you claustrophobic? And I'm not claustrophobic. And then the second question is, well, how can you be trapped, inside? And my answer typically is, most of us are inside, 22 out of 24 hours a day. You just have the option to go outside.
Right.
On the submarine, you just don't have the option to go outside.
It's a big option, dude.
It's a big option.
Knowing you can is a big deal.
Yeah.
To me.
And typically, like how long what was the average amount of time that you would be in the submarine and submerged and not.
Yeah, so like
How
a
you're
deployment, a typical fast attack deployment would be 6 months, and so then it would usually be divided into 2 missions. So each mission would be like 2.5 months.
So you'd be underwater for 2.5 months.
Yeah, you have transit time, then you get on station, do your mission, then you come off, and there's typically one, you go in port somewhere, you get food, you fix things that are broken, then you go out again on your next mission. But it could be maybe they want to divide that into 3 missions. Maybe you do 6 weeks here or 6 weeks over there or whatever. But we had one mission that was a really successful mission on my first deployment, so they extended us on station, so we were out for 102 days on that. There was no food left. I mean, we'd eaten through everything, and it was like down to peanut butter and jelly and cans of tuna fish,
shoe leather.
Can they do
shoe leather,
Can they
Navy
do an
beans.
unwrap? Can they do an unwrap with a sub the way they do with ships, or is that?
You can help. I mean, it depends on where you are. You can help. Yes, you can do an unwrap, but I mean, or they can just helicopter a, crate of food out. And you can surface, and they can.
But you still gotta with ISR stuff. You still gotta come pretty far off.
You got to come off station.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it is.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
That's a whole other world there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it really is.
But I mean, I think that even if you're not claustrophobic, you can handle that kind of environment. And I know it's different types of personalities, but I think to being in Ranger Battalion. So me and Dave were both Rangers, except he was in the hippie battalion up in 275 up at Lewis.
Yeah.
We're kind of wound up, right? And everyone thinks it's this band of brothers type of atmosphere, and it sort of is in the sense that you'll go and die for that guy, but the reality of it is also we all hate each other. It's just super competitive. You're in each other's faces. Brawls break out between guys. I mean, it happens.
Thunderdome. I'm calling Thunderdome is nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Two guys, so.
I can't imagine like being on a submarine and it's like you don't have the option to get away from those guys at all. You know?
No, there's nowhere to run.
Yeah,
there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide.
Yeah.
And if you have a disagreement with somebody, you're going to see that guy 15 minutes later. It's impossible to avoid somebody.
Yeah.
Like, how's that go down when there's like some sort of feud on the sub and you're just like, I'm gonna kill that guy. I swear to God, the next time I see him.
Yeah, I think this is interesting, and especially maybe it's just my psychology bent. I think there's this sort of down regulation that happens in people's personas. So there's some guys that would maybe be more hotheads, like when they're off the boat or if we're in port, but then once you're underway, people sort of like dial it down. And I think it's because it just doesn't, it's not going to work.
Right.
But I will tell you there is something funny, which is, all the atmosphere is recycled. And as you're breathing oxygen, you have to bleed in oxygen. So we had oxygen tanks, so we're bleeding in pressurized oxygen, or they have these things called oxygen candles, which you can burn. and they create a chemical reaction. Instead of burning smoke and releasing carbon dioxide, they actually, when you burn them, they make oxygen into the air.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And then there's an oxygen generator too, so that it does electrolysis. It splits the water atoms and makes hydrogen and oxygen. So there's 3 ways you can get oxygen. But as the officer deck, you're controlling the oxygen bleed. And there's a band, you can't just make it so that it's perfectly, it's the same as sea level, the oxygen level at sea level.
So if the guys are acting up, you turn it down, like, you know what?
So my second CO, his thing was he liked oxygen at the low end of the band.
Oh.
So when that was his shtick, take oxygen down. Well, if I'm on the mid-watch or I'm on watch, dude, I'm gonna be freaking sharp.
Right.
This is serious.
Like
business.
you're watching
I got
sonar
100 guys' lives on my hand. If I'm driving the boat, I need to be sharp.
Right.
So first thing I do is I come on, I look at if the oxygen's down low, I'd be like, Chief of the watch, commence oxygen bleed. I get that bitch up, top of the band. So I'd be. And that cat, when he'd come out, he'd always come, he somehow knew. He'd come out.
He's like, oh, I feel good. What's going on here?
He'd come out, he'd look around. I'd see this looking, scrunch his face up, and he'd look around. And then he'd take the logs and he'd like, oh, I told you. Did you start an oxygen bleed? Yes, sir. Secure the oxygen bleed. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. She's watched secure the oxygen bleed. You'd leave.
Why aren't my lips blue? He's checking his capillary refill. Too much, too fast.
The only time I ever experienced that was going to that HAPS chamber for free fall, the free fall course. And they have you take that test as they're cutting the oxygen in the chamber. And of course, I'm a big badass ranger, I take this, no problem. And they asked us very simple questions. One of them was the clock was already drawn and they just wanted you to draw the hands, draw 3 o'clock. And I looked at mine after I passed out, and it just had one arrow pointing off in one direction, and then a couple plus marks outside the clock face, going off the paper. They're they put the mask back on, and I'm like, holy shit! But that's the point of the HAPS chamber, also, is to teach you what it's like to go hypoxic, because you know this obviously, but the average person probably doesn't realize, when you're going hypoxic, it's not like being strangled. You don't feel like you're being strangled. It's just a lack of oxygen, and just things get dark until you pass out.
Yeah.
And you'll die.
You actually feel pretty good.
Yeah.
You just feel a little goofy.
Yeah.
Tired. Yeah. And you don't know you're not.
You don't know you're suffocating.
Yeah. Well, you also don't know that you're not performing.
Right.
And that's the point of that chamber, right? Is to let you know. Look, you may when you're not boxing, you think you're doing great. Yeah, you got the guys doing patty cake and they're doing this, and
that's what's interesting about a ship's commander or captain wanting the oxygen low is how do you deal with the impairment in cognitive function, or did he feel like he had it worked out?
I mean, I'm joking.
It wasn't that low.
No, I mean it's a band around normal. So I liked it above. I liked a little extra juice. You get it above what it is at sea level. It wasn't like it was 19.7, and then you can only go below that. I mean, no, it could go. I can't remember now. It was up to 21 or something like that. So I'd crank it up above normal.
Yeah.
He just liked it a little bit lower.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's all kinds of funny things about living in that environment where
I can imagine. I said, I've never been on a sub when it's underway, but I've been on one for dive operations, and you go on there and how does anybody live like this? It's interesting. I'm sure. I mean, humans are very adaptable, so.
I mean, I used to think it's a little different now. You have Elon Musk; he's launching big rockets into space and stuff, and you had the space shuttle. But really, if you think about it, it is the closest thing to a starship that human beings have built. I mean, it is completely self-contained. No. It has a nuclear reactor. It never runs out of power, at least in your lifetime, right? It doesn't run out of power. You're just limited by food. It makes its own water, makes its own air, and it's a little city. It's just a tiny little city underwater.
So, what do you guys do when you're? I mean, I imagine you are working almost around the clock, but do you have time to read books, play checkers? I mean, what do you do on a sub?
I mean, now they have switched to a 24-hour day, but when I was an 18-hour schedule, and that was sort of crazy. So you were on watch for 6 hours. Your next watch is 12 hours later because you're 3 sections. So, that quote 12 hours off. it's not off time, because during that time you're doing your maintenance, your work, you're relieving the other guy so he can go to training. And so really, I mean, I never slept more than 4 hours consecutively the entire time I was deployed. And so everybody's always kind of just weary. It's just like you're not 100% all the time because you're perennially sleep deprived.
Now, as an officer on a submarine, did you have your own like cabin, or were you in like sort of the general quarters like everybody else? How did that work?
So the captain and the XO have their own staterooms, and then the officers have what are called 3-man staterooms. So there's 3 bunks in each stateroom. So there's 3 of those. And then the most junior officers, the ensigns, they typically would sleep in one of the other berths that's called 9-man, just had 9 bunks in it. So they'd be in there until they promoted up enough to get a stateroom with one of the department heads.
Interesting. And would the enlisted, would a lot of them have to hot rack? Or
Yeah, if you're E5 or below, you're probably hot racking.
So hot racking is basically there's not enough space for everybody. So when you're on shift, you're working and somebody's sleeping, and then when you're off, you guys switch positions and they sleep in
same bed.
Same bed.
Yeah.
And not at the same time unless it's a holiday.
That's right.
As they say, it's not gay if you're underway.
Who says that?
I've heard. Friends of mine have told me. So how long were you in the Navy as a sub guy then?
I did 1 tour, so 5 years.
And then got out. So then I'm interested in like, how did you 2 guys come across each other? How did that happen?
We met at writers.
Yeah,
conference.
we were already writers by the time we met.
Okay.
Yeah. So Brian, we were actually debut authors the same year. So both of us had written books before these. He had a cool series. It was the first book was the one when we met.
First book out.
Yeah. So the first book was out of this think tank series he was writing, and I just had my second book. I was writing supernatural thrillers then, and we were in the same debut class. The thing about these conferences, so Thriller Fest is a conference. I should plug it because for any writers out there. This is where you should go. Like if you want to write in the fiction thriller genre and you're not going to Thriller Fest, then you're wasting your time.
Yeah,
because
I'm not a good networker.
I'll tell you, man, it's really. I met Brian there. I met my agent there. I met the editor this new editor that we just started work with. We met there, but also the community of writers helping each other out. It's like no one feels competitive, or at least in this organization, everybody just helps each other. And there's a huge military presence, and so we have sort of formed this little subgroup in international thriller writers of military guys, and we promote each other on social media. And like in February, a buddy of ours, Josh Hood, I'm gonna go moderate a book signing for him that he's doing when he's doing the Treadstone series.
Right.
And when that book comes out, I'm gonna do that for him, and he's trying to help us. So it's this really neat community. But anyway, so we're at Thriller Fest. It's my first one, your first one, and we're debut authors. And I am not a social guy. Like I mean, I can do it. I mean, my wife thinks I make it up that I'm not social because I'm pretty good at it, but I just don't like it. Like, I just don't like it. It's uncomfortable.
It's like meeting people you've never met before, and it's like that kind of like...
They're going to tell me things I don't want to know. Like, I don't want to know. I don't want to know you.
I don't care where you're from, you fucking weird guy.
Right.
Leave me alone.
You're going to tell me things about you, and I don't care. So, but it's just awkward, and especially, with a military background, if you deployed a lot, it's just like, what am I going to talk to you about? So... So I'm sitting in the hotel room. It's the first night, and they're going to have this cocktail reception, right? And Wendy's like, well, you got to go. Like, we came up here, and you have to meet people. Like, it's a networking thing. I was like, no, we'll just go to the thing. We'll do the breakfast. She goes, no, we have to go. So I'm looking through this book they have. It's a program, and it's got all the writers that are going to be there. And I'm looking through, and I'm finding the pictures of all the guys that are military. And I'm like, burning their faces into my brain. So I'm like, okay, I can talk to that guy. Oh, Brigadier General Tata, I could talk to him. Oh yeah, whatever, Brad Taylor, I could talk to him. So I'm getting all these names and I'm trying to memorize their faces. So I go down to this cocktail party and I'm with Wendy, and Brian had come, Karen wasn't there, right? So you were there by yourself, his wife had not come. So I'm looking for someone that I memorized from the picture. I see him sitting by him, he's a submariner, so he's sitting completely by himself.
Of course.
Right.
Was I crying at that time?
He had like a tear running down his knees, his shirt tail's untucked, kept rubbing his nose.
Like that sad Keanu meme.
Yeah. He's like sneezing and helping himself to peanuts or whatever. And I'm like, man, that is just the saddest thing I've ever seen. That's got to be a submariner. I think that's Brian Andrews. He is a submariner. So I went over and talked to him, and all joking aside, I did find him. I stalked him, I guess. I saw him sitting there. I was like, hey, Brian Andrews, right? Debut author. And it turned out our families are the same. Our values are the same. We were both Navy. We had daughters like the exact same age. And so we just hit it off and became friends. And so that's how we connected. But it was a year before we started writing. I'll let you tell the
Right. Well, Jeff has Tourette's, so it's very difficult to get past that. But I accepted him for who he is, and
True friend.
True friend.
Yeah.
And no, so the next year we get back and just sort of picked up right where we left off, and it was very easy. We were joking around just like we are now. And I think your next book had come out. And we're both planning our next book. So we're sort of in between. I was like, so you're always feeling out the other authors. Like, oh, what are you doing next? Oh, can you tell me what it's about? And, see if you can figure out whatever he's doing. So we were both planning our next book, but we hadn't started. And I don't know, it just popped in my head. I was like, it could be kind of cool. We could collaborate on something like SEALs and subs and like do some military thriller series. He's like, I don't know. He's like, how would that work? Because writing, you just write by yourself. Like, how do you see this collaboration going? And I was like, what? I don't really know. But I mean, we collaborate in the military on all kinds of projects, so we'll just sort of structure it like a project, and just try from there. He's like, okay. He's like, I tell you what. How about this? He's like, I'm happy to help you. Like, if you need some guidance on SEAL stuff, like, let me know.
Because I really did not want to do it.
Yeah, he's like, but I don't know if I'm...
And it wasn't, like, we were friends. I'd been writing since I was, like, 14 years old. I wrote short stories all through high school. I published my first story when I was 14. And I'd always written, and I just couldn't imagine a system where two people, like...
Right, how does that work?
How does that even... Yeah. So it wasn't, and then he came up with this story that was really good. And
I was relentless. I started stalking him.
Yeah.
Hey, dude.
But I offered to help him, and so we start brainstorming. It was all, he's a psychology guy, right? So this was all, and he trapped me, is what he did.
Right.
So we start brainstorming this story. We start brainstorming this story, and it's tier 1, the book tier 1. And the story starts getting really good. Like, when he first started, it's like, SEALs and subs. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
But now we have a story, and it's getting better and better. And in my mind, I'm still just helping a friend, right? And he asked a second time, and I was like, look, dude, it's nothing personal. I just don't, it wouldn't work.
Right.
So at this point, we have like this whole story kind of arced out. And Brian's like, all right, look, dude, here's the deal. I feel like I can't really write the book without you. I don't really know the special warfare community that well. Let's do this. We'll write 5 chapters together, however that works. And if it's working, great. And if it's not, you can have the story. I was like, I just got a free story. Like, I was like, honestly, I almost felt guilty. I was like, okay, let's try 5 chapters. Hey, honey, guess what?
Yeah.
And so we started writing these 5 chapters, and then we never stopped. And we wrote that whole book in like, I don't know.
4 months.
Yeah, less than that, like 14 weeks.
Super fast.
The whole book.
Yeah.
And it's only faster now. Like, it was this synergy that I could not have imagined. And what we do is probably completely different from what any other writing team does. I don't know.
So how does it work for you when you write? Who's responsible for what, or how does that happen?
Brian says that I do the nouns and he does the verbs, and we put them in a bucket and we
shake them up.
Yeah. How do we do it?
So we, in the first one, we wanted to have some structure, and so we sort of talked about it and came up with a structure that worked very well, and now that's the same structure that we use. It's not quite as disciplined as it was in the first one, but we write in a 3-act structure, which is the same structure that William Shakespeare used in all of his plays. So it's nice. We set up the first act, or we call it part 1, and we brainstorm. Okay, what is the kernel of the idea of this story? So we generate that, and from there we divide up. We write in third person, multi-point of view, so we have multiple characters and get inside their heads. So we divide those characters up, and we sort of assign chapters. So there's a really rough outline. It basically says chapter 1, this character's point of view, written by Jeff, this location, this is going to happen. And then
5 words, but we know what it means.
Yeah. And then so we'll map out maybe 8 chapters, and it'll be 4 for him, 4 for me, and we just start. And then as we're going, we're emailing the chapters back and forth. We start to build the manuscript, And then by the time we're done with part 1, we read it, we edit it, and we each take passes on the other guy's stuff. And sort of the secret sauce, I think, for us is something that Jeff came up with, I think, from the beginning, which was anything sort of fair game. Let's put our egos in a drawer, and it doesn't really matter, like, who wrote what. It's just anything can be changed. And if you start with that mentality and there's no ego to the prose, then it's a lot more fun and a lot more productive.
And easy. And when we do these 4 chapters, we're like writing simultaneously. So I might be writing chapter 1 and 2, and he's like still writing chapter 5.
Yeah.
So I know sort of what he's writing, but I'm writing, so I might be writing Dempsey, for example, in part 1. So I'm writing Dempsey and maybe Jarvis, and he's writing the bad guy and Grimes or whatever. And so we're writing simultaneously, but every few chapters, like he said, we stop, and we swap them, we rewrite each other's stuff, and then we stick those in a master file. So that does 2 things. One, it puts both, it makes it one voice.
Right.
Because we both have hands on everything.
Yeah.
But also, we know exactly what they write. I mean, like a 10-minute conversation on the phone, half of which we're talking about our wives and our kids. I don't really know what he's writing. I basically know. And so what I've read, and that'll give me an idea. So, oh, you know what? When I do this next Dempsey thing, because he wrote this, that's a great idea. And it makes it go so fast.
That's awesome.
Like it's
for work,
just, it really, really is fast. But it's also blended really, really nicely. And there's a lot of editing involved. We make a pass through part 1 and through part 2 and part 3, and then he does a pass through the whole thing, and I follow him behind, and we do that whole thing.
I've written 5 books. Like, and what you're describing just sounds like you were initially.
Like,
it sounds so schizophrenic. Like, how is that even fucking possible?
Yeah, that's
no, but you're right, because let me just tell you, like, other writers say the same thing. So we've been on a couple of panels now, because we've been around doing this for a little bit. So we'll be on these writer panels where they have co-author teams, because it is a fascinoma for people. It's like it's like going to Ringling Brothers and looking at the bearded lady. Like, how could you do that? Right.
So what's her number?
Right. Exactly, right. So we'll be up there with other writer teams, and everyone will say, "Well, how do you do it?" And we'll say it, and people are like, "What?"
Yeah, I think.
But theirs, it sounds the same to me. Like, they'll say, "Well, here's how I do it." And I'll be like, "I'd kill myself before I would do that."
Yeah.
Like, there was one team that they were like, "So what we do is I'm on the phone, and she's listening on the phone, and we're talking, and while we're talking, she's typing."
I think that
Set me on
honestly, for something like that, I think that it probably really doesn't matter what the hell the process is. It's just that, like, the personalities mesh.
Yes.
And you guys could probably just like do a totally different process and work off one Google Drive document, and it would work for you just because you work well together.
And because we have, we've sort of set from the very beginning, and we're all military guys, so you get this. Like, from the very beginning of any mission, any deployment, you set ground rules for how you're going to work as a team.
Right.
And when you do your next deployment, those ground rules are different. I'm not saying you map it all out, but especially if you're an NCO or you're an officer, you've got a different team, you're going to structure a little different. I'm going to be a little tougher, I'm going to be a little harder, I'm going to rein this in, or I'm going to give more free rein. It's almost unconscious. And you have to do that. You have to say, look, here's how we do it. And for us, it started with, we need to make sure we have the same shared goal. Like, if he's a writer who just loves to see his words in print, I'm not going to be able to work with you.
Right.
Because I don't feel that way. Like, for me, it's about creating a story that people will enjoy. Well, for Brian, it is too. So that worked out great. Not a lot of ego involved, like he said. That's huge for us. I swear to you, my wife will read something in these books, and she'll go, "Oh, you wrote this, didn't you?" And I'll be like, "I swear to God, I don't know." Because it becomes such a team thing. It's like we talked earlier about some of the jackasses that have written books in special operations, right? And how everybody's like, that's horrible because that's not the military. That's not how special operations work. Special operations is we as a team did this.
Right.
Yeah.
Most guys would never even think, well, I did. Like,
right.
It's like, what did our unit do? What did our team do?
Right.
What did our platoon do? Whatever. That's how we approach this. We as a team are going to create this story, and if me changing something makes it sell 3 more books because it is a business, then great, let's do that.
Right.
Do you ever work it where one of you writes the hero and the other writes the villain?
We do, but we swap. So that I guess I started and didn't finish that. So like if in part 1 I'm writing John Dempsey and he's writing Modiri, then we make sure that in part 2 he's writing more of Dempsey and I'm writing more of Modiri, because otherwise it does start to feel, when you read it you can tell it's a little fragmented.
And
so we have to swap it up frequently.
But so when you're doing that, how do how do you ensure that the characters maintain the same voice throughout if you guys are swapping it, or are you just kind of that in sync where you both know who these people are?
I think it's because, like Jeff said, it sounds ridiculous, but we really do make probably 4 passes before that manuscript is done. And so almost every sentence is changed. And now what's happened is, if you ask people who've read our solo work, they'll say, well, I like your solo works, but you have a different voice. This has a different voice. So this has a third voice.
Yeah, it's not either of us.
It's the combination of us.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of neat. And, now we sometimes get a little lazy. We'll write something and be like, I'm not really sure how I would solve this problem. So
Brian will fix it.
I'll just send it to Jeff and he'll fix it. And we sort of do that. But we give the other guy a heads up, be like, dude, this chapter sort of ends like, 2/3 done because I wasn't sure where to go.
You'll notice it doesn't seem like the end.
Yeah.
That's because you need to finish it.
You need to finish it. And that's a lot of trust.
Yeah.
To just hand the ball off,
Right.
To the other guy and let him take it. And we're at that point. That's pretty cool.
Not only a lot of trust, but also, like you say, like no ego. Like like I'm okay with like somebody else taking this and doing something with it that I don't know how to do. That's not easy for a lot of people to do.
And you're right, and so you got to pick your team very, very carefully.
Sure.
And some people maybe could never co-write for that reason, or they've had a bad co-authoring experience because they were not with the right person, and so it didn't work out. But for us, it's just about not having ego, and it's about I'm gonna use this terrible analogy. It's actually a great analogy, but I'm gonna embarrass Brian because it's his analogy. In case people think it's stupid, it's Brian's analogy. But we're both family guys, and that's like the most important thing in the world to both of us.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that our friendship was based on. So I have 4 kids. But Wendy and I don't have it's not like, okay, Connor and Ashley are mine, and then Emma and Jack are you, and like if you need help, let me know. But that's we raise our kids together, and if there's something I'm a little better at, then I do that, and we don't ask, we don't say you're better at this, will you do it? You just sort of know after a time in your marriage, right? My wife is going to do this part because she's way better at that, or whatever. And in our writing, it's like that. We don't care about who gets credit because it's on the cover as Andrews and Wilson.
It's our book.
It's our book. It's our child, and we just want it to be the best child it can be.
Right.
And the other thing is, we go into this knowing what our strengths and weaknesses are.
Sure.
We're not going to share that with you guys or anybody else. But I know what he does better than me, and he knows what I do better than him.
Right.
And I don't think we've ever really spoken about it, but we do know.
Right.
And so those things that he's like, oh, I'm going to let Brian fix it. I really do that because I know he's going to do a better job, and vice versa. And the other thing is, you were talking about the one voice and the rewrites. Those rewrites, when I rewrite his chapters, there's certain elements that I'm always going to do for every chapter that he does that's a little bit more my strength.
Right.
And I can think of 10 things that he does to mine that are definitely his strengths. And so that gives it that one voice too, because we've put those elements in.
So for instance, you might be saying like one of you is more detail oriented with like descriptions, and another one is more
maybe
dialogue oriented, or whatever.
Maybe one person does dialogue better, one person does research better, or setting better, or whatever.
And then how do you guys manage, and maybe this hasn't happened, but how do you manage if you have a difference of opinion in how something happens, how it goes down, a plot point, anything like that?
Everybody always asks that question, and no one ever believes us.
Yeah.
And the answer is...
The truth is, we haven't had any major disagreements.
I don't believe you.
So...
No, that's amazing though.
It's not that we haven't had discussions where I'm like, I think this and he thinks that. It's just that in the end, it sort of comes back to that, well, this is a little more his area of strength.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to just trust him. So there's a lot of trust.
Yeah.
I still kind of feel like mine's going to be better, but I'll be like, okay, well, let's try it. And we know when we're doing it. So if he knows when I say, well, why don't you go ahead and write it that way and we'll see if we like it.
Yeah.
He knows what I'm saying is I still think I'm right.
We do that a lot where we
but
say...
we've never changed it.
We'll say, we're going to... And now we preempt it. We'll say, this is how I think I'm going to handle this. I'm just going to write it and we'll see. And then if we don't like it, we'll change it. And we're both like, okay.
Yeah.
And you know what's really cool? Once you've written a number of books, you get to the point where you accept the fact that the first draft is just a draft.
Right.
And we, in this new book we were working on called Sons of War, in the very first chapter that I wrote this sentence, something like, the guy was like very busy at work, and he had a lot of deadlines, and he's an engineer at BAE, and like he was under a lot of stress, and he's trying his old friend is trying to pull him away to basically recruit him into this organization, but he takes his job very seriously. So the whole book we're writing, I'm like, well, how long can he be in Pakistan? Because he's got this, he's got this deadline. He's got to get back, and then finally,
weeks this went on. Weeks. It's like, wait, we have to change that because remember we said he's got to get back.
And then
wait, he can't do that because he's got to get back. How's he communicating with his work? He can't get fired because in the next week, blah blah blah.
Will make sense.
One day,
I called Jeff. I was laughing on the phone. I was like, I solved the problem. He's like, what did you come up with? I was like, he's not busy.
like we said he's busy.
Right.
We created him. All you got to do is take that one word out.
Yeah.
Like 18 chapters.
You get locked into that.
Problem solved. You do though, and you're a writer. You get into that.
You write chapter 1 and you're like, well, this is the path I'm on now.
Right.
Yeah. And once you accept the fact that you can change anything you want at any time, you're in complete control, and you accept the fact that rewriting is part of writing, it's great.
Yeah, it's
it
a lot
takes
more fun.
A lot of weight off your back.
Well, especially in this genre. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I mean, is it a military thriller? Is it a techno thriller?
It's military covert operations.
So, I mean, this is a genre that's, it begets a certain level of technical specificity. There's like in people, the audience kind of expects it.
Yes, I agree with that.
But you two both come from a technical background. I mean, a surgeon and a sub-engineer.
Yeah.
I got to imagine that really helps you navigate your way through the various plots and the those kinds of blind corners that you can paint yourself into as a writer.
Yeah, well, and take the spotlight off of us and just talk about the writing community now. The one good thing to come out of 20 years of sustained combat operations is there's a lot of guys now writing in this genre.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned Tony, we mentioned Brad, we mentioned Josh, who you know. But the list, Don Bentley's coming out real soon, Apache pilot. There's all these guys that have real world experience, and the quality of military covert operations thrillers is better than it's ever been.
Right.
Like Tom Clancy was an amazing writer, but he was an insurance salesman.
Right.
And he researched, and I mean, the guy was clearly a genius in his ability to see these deeper
also,
layers.
Like, if you read like Rainbow Six, I mean, Clancy will spend like 3 pages explaining like the Army rank system.
Right.
Like, this is the sergeant stripes with the rocker, and I feel like that's like Wikipedia knowledge at this time. Like, people already know this.
Yes.
And
Or if they don't care. They just want to know, did he go through the door or did he not go through the door?
I think that we're at a time now where they want more like guys like you to really like give that kind of like insight.
And there's a
world.
lot of guys out there. And so I think it's a really exciting time for this genre of thriller because there's a lot of people.
And what we decided to do with this book is we used what we call the tick on the hound approach. So we're going to drop you onto this hound that's running.
Right.
And like, we're not going to explain anything to you.
Yeah.
Like, you
just let it unfold.
You're in Dempsey's point of view on the first mission. He's going to hit this ship.
Yeah.
And like, we talk like Navy guys talk. We use the acronyms.
Right.
And we don't explain all that stuff. And there's a glossary in the back. You can look it up. But like, if you're in the military, and you guys know this, there's no spoon feeding. Like, that's not how it works.
Right.
So like, you come on board, you join your unit, and from day one they expect you to freaking learn.
Yeah.
Like, that's sort of the approach we took.
Do you find?
I think you and I have very much the same approach.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you want more, you can get more.
Yeah. Do you find that even with the glossary? Do you find that writing? Do you find that most of your readers are already familiar with all the acronyms and things like that, or sometimes is there sort of like a gap where people,
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think the answer, and it sounds like I'm hedging my bet, but I think it's both. I think we have a lot of readers that have a background that if they know most of what it means, and the little bit that they don't, it doesn't affect their enjoyment. And then we have others that know a lot less, and every now and then we'll get to say, wow, the acronyms were a little hard to wade through. So as a writer, your challenge is, if you don't want to be the kind of writer who explains it, because you think that's not enjoyable, then what you have to do is find creative ways to explain it in the context.
Right.
You know, he reached for such and does such, and so what that thing is that you named, the context of what he uses it for, I'm using this as an example, maybe explains it better. So you can put some context, you can put some dialogue in there that just gives enough clues that it makes sense.
There is that type of reader also that wants to go and like Google that, like, holy shit, is that real?
And good for them, but you don't want a 700-page book where
that is unreadable.
What we like to say is that readers love to learn, they just don't like to know they're doing it. And so, and I'm like that as a reader. I am not saying I think readers are dumb. I'm not. I'm saying that they just want to be entertained.
They don't want to read
We're not writing.
Yeah.
We're not writing War and Peace. We're not changing the world. It's entertainment.
Sure.
And so they want to be entertained. They are more entertained when they learn a little something about what it's like to be in a covert operations team or be in a helicopter or whatever. But they don't want you to feed it to them because that's boring.
Right.
And
so they want to experience it and learn.
Maybe it's a little patronizing depending on how you do it.
Right.
Because we always say, we want, you know, a housewife in Oklahoma to be able to pick up this book and enjoy it, and we want a guy who's downrange to pick up the book and be like, yeah, that's
what I would have done.
Yeah.
It's fiction. I mean, and there's drama. I mean, you cannot, we talk about this with television shows like SEAL Team, you know, great television show. There have to be dramatic elements because people like that. And there also, you know, what a lot of people don't understand about storytelling is, you know, I mentioned earlier that 3-act structure. We've all had that experience where you've read a book and you got to the end and you're like, I didn't like that, you know. And maybe if you're not educated in storytelling, you might not be able to articulate why you didn't like it, but it wasn't satisfying. You just know you didn't like it. Well, that's because we've all been sort of socialized in this storytelling. All the stories we get from the time that you're a little kid and your parents are reading to you, to movies and television shows and the books we read. There is a structure. And if you deviate too much from that structure, it can be a very unsatisfying experience. So that means that those dramatic elements need to be incorporated, or it will be a shitty book.
Right. Yeah. If the pacing's off, if there are too many beats, if all these things, it's just like it grinds your teeth a little bit. It's like what I don't know what this is, but I don't like it.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Yeah. I notice that a lot in movies. Like if something happens and a character didn't really earn it, you know, if it just kind of happens, like that wasn't very satisfying. Yeah. You know,
that's something like I kind of struggle with too, and maybe you guys also, is like the difference between a novel or a movie. The fiction of it has to make sense. Mm-hmm. But if you're actually a soldier in combat, a lot of times it just doesn't make any fucking sense.
And it doesn't have to.
Right.
Yeah, and so you don't have the luxury of doing that in fiction, right?
Right.
And the other thing you don't have the luxury of doing in fiction is showing the 9 days of doing nothing that went before the mission that actually only took like 12 minutes on the X.
Yeah.
Like that's not a very exciting book, 12 minutes on the X. So
you can write a 300-page book just about Army logistics.
Yeah.
I mean,
but no one will read it.
Right. No one's interested.
The other thing I think is important when you write these kinds of things and the stuff that you're doing is you need to make sure that your characters sell it, right? Mm-hmm. So this is another element where the reader doesn't know why they didn't really find it satisfying. They just didn't, and that is when they have these two-dimensional superhero,
the whole Mary Sue, Gary Stu type.
They never
6 foot 3.
They write
green eyes,
bullets bounce off of them.
Yeah,
and so you have to have not flawed characters. You just have to have normal human beings.
Right.
And like having had the honor of serving in the special operations community. The thing I always say about the guys I worked with that I found most awe-inspiring was how absolutely ordinary they were.
Yeah.
And they were guys, and you know, at the unit that I'm at, it's a very mature unit, and you know, these guys are older. They're, you know, you've been in 12, 15 years. These are guys, they're married, they have kids, they're taking the trash to the curb, they're going to a Little League game, they're picking up milk on the way home. They are ordinary. What's extraordinary about them is how committed they are to doing something impossible.
Right.
They don't have any special gifts to do it. They're not made of steel. They just believe in their country, they believe in their brothers, and they want to serve. That's what's extraordinary about them. If you write that character, and that's what we've tried to capture in Dempsey and now in this new series, Sons of War, that's coming out.
So
next
Sons
year.
of War is not a Dempsey Ember story?
It is a shared world series. So
Okay.
there's a character we first introduced him in War Shadows. His name is Keith Redmond. He's a SEAL officer, and this small unit of SEALs augments Dempsey's covert ops unit to do a mission. And we got a great response. He's a cool character. He's an amalgam of people all of us in this room have known.
Yeah.
Right? He's just like kind of a good old boy, super smart, but you got to know him for a while before you realize he is. And he's always got a dip in his mouth. And but the readers loved him. And he was like pretty small in here. It was like just in the Central America part, really, and then he disappears. And so we brought him back in Crusader 1.
Yeah.
And then people really loved him. And people were like, oh, when is Chunk coming? His nickname's Chunk.
Yeah.
So we were able to spin off a series with another publisher. It's coming out from Blackstone in 2021. And that new series is Sons of War. And the premise is that in Tier 1, the premise is that the entire Tier 1 SEAL team gets wiped out in an ambush.
Okay.
The only survivor is this guy who assumes a new identity. He is presumed dead also. His name's Jack Kemper. He takes on the identity of John Dempsey,
Right.
joins a super secret organization to hunt down the guys that did it, right?
Right.
Well, if that happened for real, they would not just never have a Tier 1 SEAL team again.
Right.
They would stand it back up.
Right.
And so the premise of Sons of War is Chunk and his guys are the new Tier 1 SEAL team, and so it's gonna be all SEAL team kind of stuff.
Right.
So we're really excited.
So a
about
lot of
this.
hair products.
Right. Right. A lot of book deals.
Yeah, a lot of Oakleys.
Personal appearances. Time on Fox News.
Yeah.
Question from a viewer. What is your approach to describing the interpersonal interactions between characters in military books? Well, you said before, they're sailors. They talk like sailors.
They do talk like this. So I think you're right them realistically, but I don't think it's different for a military thriller. I think it's the same thing I did in supernatural thrillers and things that you've done in your books. He's written some great techno thrillers. Reset, I'm going to give a plug. Great book if you haven't read it. But you write it naturally. The way you don't describe relationships, let it come out in relationships, right? Like, don't you hate that book where this spirit above you narrates what their relationship is? Like,
Right.
How does that work? Like, let it come out in dialogue. Let their tensions be seen. Let their awkwardness be seen. You can tell if they like each other or don't like each other. If the narration says he didn't like her, I hate that.
Right.
I can tell he didn't like her by the way you frame up the dialogue and all those sorts of things. So that'd be the only thing I would say is about that. Anything to add to that? Like,
No, I mean that's exactly right. And then the only other thing is, as a psychology guy, I like to think about personality profiles for characters, and so our characters, you could give them all Myers-Briggs, and they would have different personality
We don't do that.
profiles. Jeff doesn't.
I knew it.
I do.
The secret sauce.
Yeah, I remember when I was working on my first book, I was like, this is when I was writing by myself. The first book, I was like 75% done, and I'm going back and reading. I'm like, oh, this is so good. Oh, it's so good. Oh, that's exactly what I would do. That's exactly what I would do. And then I realized, oh no, they're all just like me. Every single character is just like me.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, I need to make them all different. Give them a different Myers-Briggs, and that helped me to say, okay, like, I need characters that would do absolutely the opposite of what I would do in that situation. Yeah. Who would say something that I would never say.
Right.
And so that's what you do, is you pit these characters together. And sometimes we don't even know, really. I mean, you start the chapter, you have a goal for the chapter, but it's not until they start butting heads.
Right.
Well, that's what's fun about a series, is you can evolve those things. So you read Tier 1. There's a character, Elizabeth Grimes, that is now actually one of the fan favorites in this series. That would surprise you if you only ever read Tier 1, right? Because she was kind of a bitch. Like she was
our devil's
She was devil's advocate, and she didn't really trust these guys, and she was a know-it-all. And we have over 5, almost 6 books now evolved her into this whole different person, and her relationships with all these other characters have evolved also over time through shared experience, just like when you deploy, right? Like there's a guy that when you're in garrison at home, you wouldn't have a beer with that guy.
Right.
But you deploy with him and you see this other side of him and you come back and you're best friends. Sometimes the other way happens.
Right. Yeah.
That guy that's all fun, well, he's good at being fun, but he ain't that great outside the wire.
Right.
And so these things change over time.
Yeah.
And so you, in a series, you're not trying to compress all that into 300 or 400 pages. You can arc it out over several books, and it's so much more fun.
So when it comes to that type of character development, when you develop a character, when you introduce a character, do you have an idea of who that person is at their core, why they're acting that way, and who they'll become in future books? Or are you just kind of like, in the next book, like, let's do this with this person and see where
I'm
it goes?
winging it. Apparently, he's got an entire psychological file with all of these people. I don't know.
No, I think what we do is when we start, as the book's going on, there is discussions about the emotional and psychological state of each of the characters.
For sure, and they have to have a role.
And then during and through the first draft, we always go back and we say, okay, now we need to add conflict and tension to the dialogue. So if everybody's getting along swimmingly, we'll say, all right, what are some areas where they actually could be struggling or disagreeing, and that happens in rewrites. And then you'll see growth through that book. And so then when we start the next book, we're like, okay, Dempsey is here in his evolution. We've taken him from here to here. And you were talking about Elizabeth Grimes, like how much she's changed. She's changed the way some of the other characters think too. So yeah, she's come closer to them, but she's pulled them closer to her too. So that's sort of interesting. And so yes, at the beginning of each book, we do sit down and say, where are these guys and girls going to end up at the end? And in this book, we have some trauma that happens. So at the beginning of the book, we said the team's a little overconfident, and we wanted to write it the way they're a little overconfident. Things have been going pretty well, and they've been on a little bit on cruise control. They're getting a little big for their britches, and we want that to come out. And there's going to be a little bit of a reset. Some stuff's going to happen to knock them back down to earth. And it's interesting. A reviewer texted me. He was about a third of the way through. He's like, "Did you guys make a mistake? Like this such and such happened. Like it seems like an oversight, like on your part." And I was like, "No, it's not an oversight on our part. It was an oversight on the character's part. Like, he was overconfident.
Keep reading.
Keep reading.
Yeah.
He messed up. And he's like, "Oh, cool. Well, I'm going to keep reading." And so now for book 6, we're at that stage where they're going through some shit.
Yeah.
So like we've gotten into the nitty gritty a lot, but I want to take like a step back just because I'm reluctant to admit it, because I do take a lot of pride actually in reading all of the books of the people I interview. But I just didn't have time.
We sent you a lot of
them. We sent you $5.
I'm sorry.
We sent you $5 like a week ago.
But I wanted to put you guys on the spot a little bit, but also give you the opportunity to sell the series. I grew up reading Mac Bolan. So, I love the genre. Nowadays, as we talked about, the genre is really flooded. It's really saturated. Some of them are very good. Some of these writers are very good. I really loved the late Dalton Fury before he passed away. Mark Greaney, I really enjoy his work.
Yeah,
but there are a lot of these books out there. Others kind of suck.
Yeah.
Just to be real about it. What is this book series about? There's a lot of these out there. Why do I want to pick up this one?
Yeah, this one is, like we said, it is covert ops, but I think what separates us is the authenticity and just the pacing. So when you start any of these books, we start with action and we really never let the foot off the gas, so to speak. And I think since you're asking us to toot our own horn, we'll go into it.
Yeah.
I think we do geopolitics really, really well. And
we're a little lucky.
We're a little lucky, but it is.
What did you say?
We've had a couple of books where the book came out, and then we've had that happen a couple times.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of research that goes into it.
Like we had a bunch of people emailing us about that book, American Operator. They're like, wait a minute, this came out last year and all this stuff's happening in Syria that you guys wrote about. And that's part of our what if scenario. We try to be very deliberate about looking
Did you
at
ever fuck yourself though? Because like then something in real life happened and you're like, ooh, that doesn't really make sense anymore.
you could. We
it
talked
hasn't
about that.
yet, but eventually, I suppose.
Yeah.
That's almost inevitable. I think that if you look at the genre in general and you say, describe the technique for most of these books, I think that you would find that most books in this genre are plot driven.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you agree? I think they're almost all plot driven. I think what's different about our books is we invest a huge amount of time in what I hope are very exciting plots and storylines, but ours are character driven.
Right.
We drive the story with the characters and their sacrifice and their relationships, and that's a little bit unique in the genre.
You use a character to tell the story.
We
right?
use the character to tell
Yeah.
the story. There's very, very little narration in these books.
Yeah.
You see this unfold through the eyes of characters that are very realistic because they're people that we knew. And so I think that's, if I had to sum it up in just a couple sentences, what's different about our work, why has it been so successful in the genre, that's probably it. Like we were saying earlier, as a reader, do you sit here and think, well, this is incredibly well character driven? And no, you just say, I really liked it. I think that's why they really like it.
Yeah.
I think they really like it because they feel like they know these people and you care about what happens to them because
Right.
they seem real to you.
Well, that's one of the reasons I mean, even just like the relation, right? Like you say, you start off with action, and the characters like you get a sense of the relationship between the characters like right from the beginning. You know, just on the heel right out, right? You start to get who these people are to each other, how they relate, and for me, like when I'm reading, you know, a fiction work, a lot of times I look at it and go, could I put, you know, swords and magic, you know, could I take these exact same characters and put them in a completely different environment and will it still be a compelling read? And with these books, it's yes, you know, that because these are interesting characters.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter, you know, if it's an M4, it doesn't matter if it's a Claymore sword, that it's the characters that are, you know, that are like that you're relating to. And that's what drives us, right? Like you say that these people loved Chunk, which I haven't. You know, do you know what it was about that character that people responded to so strongly? But because obviously, if he were just kind of a placeholder, or you know, okay, now we need to have this person who fulfills this piece of the plot that we need to move forward, then people wouldn't have that kind of response to it.
Well, we try never to have those characters.
Right.
If someone has a reason for the story to have them, then we try to give them a character-driven role in that story. Even if they just come through in one book and they're dead halfway through,
Right.
we try to bring them to life. So I can't tell you what it was about Chunk, but I think it was just because, I think more than a lot of the other characters, Chunk truly is an amalgam of some people that we know and have a relationship with, and we've put some, and so maybe,
idiosyncrasies.
so maybe
Yeah.
he came a little more to life on the page because he is modeled after, and we won't give names of the 3 or 4 people that he's an amalgam of, obviously, but maybe that's why. Maybe we wrote him a little better. He came to life a little bit more. I don't know, but I think you're right. I think that's the key, right? Is they care about him because they seem real. So I grew up reading Stephen King, was my favorite writer growing up. I read extensively in this genre, and I read Stephen King and Kuntz. Those were my writers. And the thing about King that makes him so special isn't that he thinks of these crazy horror things, because there's literally hundreds of people that do that every day, and some of them are more clever than what King comes up with.
Uh-huh.
What King does is he writes it through the eyes of characters so realistically that you can't not find out what happens next, because it's like the guy's in the room with you. I used to say he could write a 400-page book about someone reading the Yellow Pages, and I would read it in one sitting, and I would be sad when I was done.
Yeah.
Even if there was no plot.
Yeah.
Because it's so real.
Yeah.
And I am not comparing us to King, but that's what we try to do. We try to emulate that rich character, little idiosyncrasies that someone will relate to.
Right.
There's little things that King does where you're like, no one writes about that, but we all do it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it makes them real, right?
Right.
Stupid little things
Right.
that you just don't think to put in a book. And so we work hard to do that with our characters so that they come to life, and then that drives the story because you care about the people.
Right. Yeah, 100%.
let me give the obligatory YouTube call to action real quick.
Yes.
Before we move on. Thanks again for everyone who's joining us. There's like 29, 30 people watching live, and many more will watch over the subsequent week. So thanks for coming, hanging out with us tonight. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that little bell icon so that you get notified the next time we go live. And if you're interested in supporting the stream financially, you'll also find a link for that down in the description if you take a look for it. So thanks. And if you have any questions for our guests today, the authors of the Tier 1 series, please get them in, and we'll definitely take some more questions.
Also, big shout out to DJ. Thank you very much. And also, Welper Style, thanks for seeing DJ's donation and raising your savings of 1 Canadian penny. Thank you. That's I like to think that we're a worthy retirement plan, yeah?
Okay, Andrew wants to know, what are your 3 favorite war movies?
Oh, that's a good question.
Black Hawk Down. I think you and I are different on this. I really liked Zero Dark 30. You're not so.
Not enthused.
Not as enthused
Not
about Zero Dark 30. American Sniper.
That's my other one.
Yeah. Boy, when they did the Ramadi thing, it's like, they can't have filmed this in Ramadi, but oh my God, this looks like Ramadi.
That it felt like it. I've never been to Ramadi.
It was crazy. Like, yeah, just very, very authentic. Is that 3? What was it?
But you need to pick a third.
Oh, I have to pick it? We have to. So there's 6? No, that's not fair.
No, you just don't like Zero Dark 30. 13 Hours is a good one.
Yeah. That's
13 Hours.
That's a great movie.
Yeah.
What about pre-9/11 movies?
Oh, I'm digging in.
Well, Black Hawk Down was.
Right, that's true, yeah.
Like the Winter War is one of my favorite. It's obscure, but it's about the in Finland in World War II.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. That was good. Hey, and here's a shout out if you love the World War II, Norway, Finland, all that stuff. Andy Gross's book, Andrew Gross, has a book out called The Saboteur. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, I'll
It's
take a
one
look
of the
for
best
it.
books ever. But we were talking about movies. I loved Hunt for Red October. That was great.
Oh, yeah.
And then Crimson Tide. A little shout out to my submarine friend.
Yeah.
See, because I know nothing about submarines, so I could enjoy it.
Right.
We've had this conversation
Yeah.
before. He's like, "Yeah, I can't do that."
So is it the inaccuracies in the movies that get you when it comes to like that kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say so.
No, I get it. I totally get it.
Nolan wants to know the most expensive piece of equipment you broke.
Oh.
in the books.
I suspect he's asking about real life. He can clarify if he wants to get into it. I mean, did you ever break the nuclear reactor?
No.
No.
That would be
because none of us would be able to one up that.
Who asked that?
Nolan.
So is Nolan actually CID and he's been hanging out on this
Yeah.
channel the whole
He's like
time?
checking our
He's been
accounts.
waiting. He's been waiting for you to come up.
Yeah. No, I didn't break anything expensive.
I don't know. I can't
Do we
see-
have-
Super expensive medical gear that you
I have
trashed.
I can't think of anything.
I have a buddy that forgot to, it was called pinning the radar mast. So you have to basically, the radar mast on a 688 it has a fairing on the top. And you have to pin it so it's held down hydraulically. It's on this checklist. And if you do it wrong, then the hydraulics can loop and the fairing, if it gets any water, and just a little bit of water, it'll suck it up. And so it happened when they were diving, and it sucked off the fairing, and it went through the screw. Oh. And then they're like, sonar's like, con sonar, our own ship is cavitating, and they're like, oh no. And they were leaving on deployment. They had to turn around, go back into dry dock, and fix the screw.
Yikes.
And the other boat that was on station had to stay on station, so he felt pretty bad. He won't remain nameless.
How was that fit rep?
What's that?
How was his fit rep that cycle?
He ended up staying in, and he became a department head, and was an admiral's aide later. He was super smart.
It didn't end his career though.
No.
So
No.
yeah.
There were some other incidents I'm aware of that ended people's careers, but that was not one of them.
Yeah. you weren't, you didn't happen to be in Guam during the earthquake, did you, in like 94 or 93?
No.
Okay. We were doing a dive up on a sub there, and it was mayhem. Because it was like an 8.2 earthquake, yeah. We had divers in the water. They thought the sub was sinking. They had no idea what was going on, but because everything started shaking. So a little bit of a panic fest in the old cofferdam there.
Really? They thought like the nukes had flown?
They had no idea what was going on. Because, like I said, it was in Guam. There was an 8.2 earthquake. They, you know, when you're doing dive ops on like subs or other things, you know, they're not dry docking, so you have to create a dry environment if the equipment calls for it. So you build a cofferdam that basically fits up, you know, molds to the bottom of whatever it is. It's a big box. Build kind of a bench in it, and then you put high pressure air in them to blow the water down so that you have a dry environment. So guys will swim up underneath there, you know, remove their rigs a lot of times, and then sit there and work. Well, this earthquake hits, and they don't know what's going on. They think the sub is sinking.
Oh,
and you know, and they're going down, and they're trying to get their rigs back on. Yeah, it was mayhem for them. Like one guy, that was pretty much it for him. Like,
I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to overcome that, but yeah, it was interesting. But just curious if maybe you had been there. I mean, it's a big world, but it's also a small world, you know. So,
I can tell you something about when we're off air.
So Nolan also wants to know about how wild would sub dudes go when they would finally get to port or get to home station.
Oh yeah, no, Liberty was crazy, and you know,
everybody's a Liberty risk.
Yeah. I told him that. Wow, another story, another off-air story. I told him that. Yeah, no, because you're cooped up.
Yeah.
You're cooped up for months, and then you go and you get a week, and so people go crazy. And you know, here's another interesting thing though that you wouldn't really think about, but it's just sort of real life. Is, you know, you've been in that tube, and you're all breathing the same air, and then you go to another country, and now you come up, and one guy gets a bug, you know, gets sick.
Right.
So then you go to sea. Now everybody gets to get it. You know, so like literally, it's like 5 days underway. Whatever that is that people picked up in that new port that nobody had immunity to, it just makes its way through the whole boat.
Right.
And it's just misery. It's just misery until like it cycles through everyone, and then like no one gets sick. And that's the other weird thing. Like you don't get sick. Like the germs become static, and there's no new germs. So you know, once you're through that new germ period, the rest of the deployment, nobody's getting sick.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Did you guys have beer rats? Did you guys have like beer rations?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was curious.
The Brits did, but we didn't do
Yeah.
that. But one other interesting thing is, you know, new words I can see how language changes over time, because new words get made up and it's always through jokes. You know, somebody will do something, and then that becomes an inside joke, and then a term, like some stupid term, like what's that Urban Dictionary online? You know, well, that would happen underway, and you'd pull in, you'd come back after deployment, we'd all be using this slang, and you'd run into guys from other boats, and you'd say, and they're like, "What does that mean?" And you're like, "Oh, yeah."
Yeah, that's right. You were with us.
You were with us.
that actually must be like a really as a psychologist, must be an interest, like a fascinating study on just like people in an enclosed. It's a self-contained, community that has nothing new. It's like an Appalachian village in a way, right?
I was amazed how fast it happened, and I thought if we were out here for 2 years, there'd be a whole new dialogue, the way that people talk to words and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, they'd probably like get ashore and have a hard time communicating with people.
Yeah.
Huh.
Speaking a foreign language.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Well, I mean, like not that long ago, like 200 years ago, I mean, each village kind of had a different dialect, right?
Yeah. It's fascinating.
And it's kind of driven by, quite frankly, like a small handful of people.
Right.
The funny people who are funny, people who have very,
extroverted personalities.
Yes. They drive it.
Right.
Yeah.
Charismatic personalities.
Yeah.
So when you go to things like Thriller Fest, was it Thriller Fest? Is that what you said? Thriller Fest or these other things? Is there? Do you find that the military riders tend to sort of segregate themselves or sort of clump together because of that, not an inability to relate to other people, but almost a lack of desire
It's
or
a camaraderie,
Yeah.
shared experience.
Yeah.
I think there's some of that. I mean, it's not to the exclusion of everyone else.
Sure.
We certainly have plenty of friends that didn't serve that are part of the ITW community. But yeah, no question that just like if there was a bunch of lawyers there that all wrote legal stuff, they would
Sure.
all tend to hang out together, I would assume. But yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. There's a great community of military guys in that.
Yeah.
I think we've served though as a resource too for a lot of the other. That's one of the things we've tried to do, is just be very open to sharing, our experiences with other riders who are very curious, would like to know what it's like to do those things.
Yeah.
So we always try to do that.
How has your, having not been involved in the Spec Ops community or anything like that, like, have you done a lot of independent research? Is it mostly sort of through his influence? Like, how has your knowledge of that world expanded since starting these books?
Oh, because of Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're going to be a Thriller Fest, right?
Now that you hard sold me on it, yes.
It's not like you have to fly 4,000 miles.
Is it here in New York?
You know, there's a bridge.
I believe it
there's
is.
a bridge over here that goes right across.
Once you live in Brooklyn, you don't really go to the city.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
who does that?
Yeah.
Actually, I again dragging my daughter around with me. I'm going on Chris Perante's podcast tomorrow with
Okay.
Oh, that's awesome.
my old friend Ian. He hosts the show,
Yeah.
so I'm going on it with him. So. Yes, I will be making the trek over to Manhattan
There you
tomorrow.
go.
But no, I think I probably should go to it and go. Some of these people like Mark Greeny, Josh Hood, who else? A few other guys who I've been talking to off and on for years, but I've never met them in person. So I probably should.
They'll all be there.
Yeah. I've been
We
trying.
can all go out.
Yeah, we'll all go out.
I've twisted Mark's elbow to try to get him on too.
Yeah.
He acted like all squeamish about it, like, oh, I don't. You've never had like a non-military guest on. I'm like, Mark, get the fuck out of here. Like, come on. He's probably.
So you'll be nice.
I'm always nice.
Right.
I'm always nice.
Right. How much fun of them can you?
I'm mostly nice.
How much fun of one person can you make?
Okay, so you said there's a spin-off series coming out. We talked about that a little bit. And then there's book 6 in this series on the way also?
Mm-hmm.
September.
Okay. Awesome. I asked Brad Thor one time. I asked him, do you have, you don't have to reveal it here, but do you have in the back of your mind, does your hero end up retired to living in a log cabin somewhere one day, or does he go out in a blaze of glory? Like in the back of your mind, is there an end point for the protagonist?
Funny, no one's ever asked us that. So our answers might be very different. I can tell you that for me, I have not thought about how it ends for Dempsey, whether he's retired in a log cabin or eventually finds he can do things other than operate. But other characters in the book, and we can't really talk about it because they're actually in the plans, but there's most of the other characters in the book, actually, we sort of know where they're going over the next several books and where they end up and stuff like that. But I don't think we've ever talked about Dempsey. Like, Dempsey's just kind of always there.
I almost sort of feel like he's almost like a Batman, where like his legend, like what he is will live on.
Like the Phantom. Like somebody else could take over.
Yeah, like even if he retires his knock, that somebody else would step into that
Becomes
Dempsey.
sort of an evergreen legend that other people walk into. Now, there is a neat connection that will develop, and we can drop a breadcrumb here. In order for him to become John Dempsey, he had to allow them to bury him in Arlington with the rest of his teammates.
Faked his death and everything.
Yeah. So John Dempsey his whole life is a knock. And but he left an ex-wife and a son behind, and we have teased out this element in the first book or two. He's obsessed with. He's going to get all the guys that killed his teammates, and then he's going to let her know. He's going to let Kate know that I'm still here, and it's all going to work out. And then
he's always kind of.
And she got married, and so. But the son.
But it's sad though. He's kind of watching her on social media.
Yeah.
He's not supposed to.
Like the son might be working for him one day.
Well, the son in this last book we've revealed, we reveal it in American Operator. The son is off to Buds.
Oh shit.
So
He
yeah,
graduated high school
and Dempsey doesn't know how he feels about that,
Right.
You know, and this is a kid. Imagine the guilt. This is a kid who's off to follow in his dead father's footsteps and has no idea his dad isn't even dead. Right. And so there's a lot of moral conflict for poor John.
I mean, just speaking to like the intergenerational conflict, and we saw this when we went and saw Scott Mann's play. At the end of it, I don't know if you ever met Scott. He's a retired Special Forces officer. And he has this play called Last Out. It's really good. And I probably shouldn't give too much away, but towards the end of the play, it plays out this. It's about a Special Forces team sergeant. At the end of it, it's his kid is joining the Army. And it's like, how do you feel about that? Like, we are gifting this war to our kids. Like, and how does that play out? And like, not too many people have really gotten deep into that because it's kind of just starting to happen now, I feel like. But it's like, I'm a father, you're a father, like, that kind of like hits you right in the guts.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, how would I feel about that,
But you know what's interesting? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's the title of the new series, is
Sons of War. The idea that there's a generation that never knew anything but this war.
Right.
And how are they different from us that went over early in this war? And I get, and it is going to be different. But that's an interesting question that we don't really address in Sons of War, which is the dynamic between the two generations.
Yeah.
I've got a son who, my older son's in college now, but my younger son is got several years to go, but he wants to go to the Naval Academy, and he wants to be a pilot. And he's an incredible young man, so he probably will. And I'm fine with that. Like, if he told me he wanted to be an operator, I don't know, that'd be different. But he wants to be a fighter pilot, and his granddad was a fighter pilot, and I started out as a pilot, and but his mom is not as okay, and it's been a struggle for her to come to terms with. And she actually, to get serious for a minute, I guess, she read Aaron Vaughn's mom wrote a book, and I wish I could remember the name of it, but. She wrote a book. Aaron was
the SEAL.
He was killed in Extortion 1-7. So he was one of the 18 guys that was lost. And she wrote a book in the wake of his death that was the complete opposite of what you would expect. Mm-hmm. And she's got a very strong faith. She's a Christian woman, and her faith is very important to her, and it's very evident in this book. But the whole theme of the book is, instead of remorse and sort of honoring her son and telling all these stories, she's saying, as a mother, what is your role when you feel your son has been called to a job like this? And she said, who am I to question God's plan for my son? It's heartbreaking book to see the love she has for her son and how she's glad that she supported what she felt he was called to do. And that book changed everything for Wendy. So Wendy read this book because our faith is very, very important to us. She leads a women's ministry at our church. I lead a men's military ministry for our church. And hearing someone else with that same faith background talking specifically from a parent standpoint, because we're the kids, right? Like, I still think of myself as like my dad. How does he feel about the things?
And we got to go out and do whatever we wanted, and
and we're just now getting to the point where we have to consider what would it be like as it was for Karen Vaughn when she lost Aaron. So, she's a half a generation ahead of us, but now it's our turn, and how are we going to deal with that? What are we going to tell our kids? Your kid comes to you. And so that's a book, if there's anybody out there listening that is struggling with those questions, I can't recommend. I wish I could remember the title, but Karen Vaughn is who wrote the book. But amazing book.
Even from just, if we look at it, even just from a secular, type of perspective, is that we went out and we did what we wanted to do. Like, I wanted to go to war. Jack, we all did what we wanted to do. And now, just because of our and just because of our experiences, it's like, well, your kids want to do that exact same thing. You're like, I don't know.
Right.
But, we never would have denied ourselves that time, or our buddies that time.
My mom never told me I can't do that. She was never like, no, you're going to be disowned from the family if you do that. She was like, well, I love you, Jack.
You actually feel both, don't you? Like, there's that, gosh, I don't want, first of all, they're always that 4-year-old to you, even when they're 19.
Yeah.
But you don't want anything bad to happen to them. But on the other hand, you're also filled with this incredible sense of pride in them that they feel that call to service, that they want to serve a cause greater than themselves. All those things that you hope you were teaching them, right? Like you kind of hope that they got that from you, that you've taught that into them. And then when you do and it's successful and they say, well, now I want to serve you, like, well, I don't want you to do that. I want you to take it quite.
Whoa.
I just want you to say the national anthem. I want you to kneel, like, put your hand over your heart.
Right. Yeah, salute the flag. We're good. We're good.
Well, it's also like these two perspectives, because on one hand, like, here's your book, like, whoa, this dude running away from an explosion, like, how cool is that? I want to go do that right now. Or I did the same thing, like, whoa, look at the guy's wearing his plate carrier.
Right.
Yeah.
It's light on, he's in the dark. Like, what's going to happen next? But then if your kid comes to you and is like, I want to do that, you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
Wait, our government really doesn't have a plan for these countries. You know that, right?
We need to have a conversation.
Like, we need to, like,
Just
you understand the geopolitics going on right now? Like, it's not World War II. There's not a clear mission.
Yeah.
Maybe wait and see what happens.
Maybe Air National Guard.
Yeah. Civil Air Patrol.
But yeah, it's like, how do you like reconcile? I feel like it's almost like two images of the world, that
Sure.
you have. And when like my kid, my daughter asked me these questions, like, what do you do in the Army? What's it like? Where do you sleep? What do you eat? Did you go over? You jump out of airplanes? You did all this stuff? And like, I struggled to I want to tell her the truth about it, which is like, yeah, it's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah,
but on the other hand, it's like, I don't want to like propagandize my kid or like you should go do this.
Right.
Like, this is the right thing to do. You need to go do this when you get older. Which now a female soldier can apparently do a lot of these things. It's been passed through Congress and all that. So it's like, yeah, I struggle with it. Like, what do I tell my kid about it?
Right.
Yeah.
It was cool when I did it, but you should get an MBA.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a great time. I loved every minute of it. It was just, oh man, no, it sucked. No, you shouldn't do that. No. You don't understand. Yeah. It's tough. It's one of those situations where, like, I started out in the Marine Reserve, and then I was active Navy, then active Army, and then, went and did other stuff. And I loved every minute of it. Even the suck. The suck is actually, those are the times you remember, right? When it sucks the most. But I don't know if I would want to, say I loved every minute of it, and I don't know. It's a weird situation now too, with these unending wars and no real, what do we do? It was fine for me, but I don't know.
And also it's like, not to like pat myself on the back, or maybe I shouldn't at all, but I've probably put more kids into the military than any recruiter's tour ever, just from all these podcasts and everything I've done. Right. Because these kids contact me. Right. And they want to ask questions, or they're like, oh, I'm in basic training now, and I got really interested and I started listening to your podcast and stuff. It's like, on one hand, it's like, I'm really proud of that. It's like, wow, that's really cool. I was able to give these young people additional information and help them make their decision. On the other, it's like, oh, Jesus Christ, what have I done?
Yeah. But the thing is, they probably would have gone in anyway, only without the information.
Yeah.
And enlisting without information is just a fool's game.
And that's the way I see it. And this is like, we all served in the military, and like I kind of see this partly as like public outreach. It's like kind of like, these things exist. You could be a submariner, you can be a doctor in the military. These are all these great things you can do, but ultimately it's up to them to make that decision.
How do writers, aside from using you guys as a resource, like how do writers, how do they view you? How do they approach you? Do they think that you all have like post-traumatic stress? Do they, how do they treat you?
Or is it like awkward?
Yeah.
That hasn't been my experience, but I think it's in the writer community, we're their fellow writers.
Okay.
So it would be different for, if a writer was coming to me and saying, I want to talk to you about your wartime experience, that would be weird, I think. So I don't know, I don't have a satisfying answer to that, just because within that community, I'm
Just you're right.
Yeah,
Okay,
a writer like
that's great.
And not that they, obviously we talk about our military
But
experience.
you could talk a little bit about the panels, that we do.
Yeah, we've done some really cool panels at Thriller Fest. That's right, you don't come. At Thriller Fest, what we do is every year, actually this year we're not going to have it because they've had to condense the panels. So this will be the first year we haven't done it in a number of years, but it'll be back in 21. But we do a couple of panels. One is there's always some sort of military writers panel where they talk about their experiences and how they incorporate it into that writing. I'm sure they'll have one this year. They always do. And those are great panels. And those readers are really interested in not just your military service, but how you take that and put it into writing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do another panel, Brian and I've done for 4 years now, I guess, where we bring operators that are not writers, and they sit on a panel, and the idea of the panel is that, this one is very highly moderated. We don't do a lot of Q&A because it would be uncomfortable if they ask crazy stuff.
Right.
But
I just think of your character putting the dip in the mouth and the
Yeah,
spit.
right.
Let me tell you a story.
Yeah, exactly. There was knee deep in hand grenades.
And so those panels have been surprisingly focused very little on what you would think. We went in there a little nervous about how tightly we were going to have to moderate these incredibly inappropriate questions we were going to get. We didn't really get them.
But
The questions-
it does give people a chance to ask real operators questions.
And they ask questions more like, what's it like for your family? How is, it's really actually quite impressive how the panel unfolds. But it's neat because writers who aren't military get an opportunity to have, this year was all NSW guys, but in the past we've done a mix of Green Berets and SEALs, and they can talk to these guys about real questions about what it's like, so that when they write these characters, maybe they won't write the Superman superhero crap that's out there.
Did all the NSW guys get book deals while they're there?
And they mostly have.
All 7-figure deals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Did they all shoot Bin Laden every single?
Dave, we're gonna get downvotes because of you.
Sorry,
I know it.
sorry.
I know it.
Sorry.
Dave hits the SEAL jokes every time, and I try not to encourage it too much, but a little bit.
But it's hard not to.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
It's hard not to egg it on.
So you said that you've been, Jeff. You said you've been writing your whole life. Like, when was your first book? And then the same, like, for you and.
Well, so I been writing my whole life, in that I always wrote short stories mostly. So I wrote short stories from the time I was 12 or 13, published one at 14, and then I always wrote. There wasn't a year that I never went a whole year without writing and trying to publish at least one short story. I didn't write a full-length novel until much later, and to be honest, at the time, I think I just didn't think I had the attention span to it. I mean, you look at this, and you write a short story, and it's like 20 pages long, and that's a long one. There's only a handful of magazines you can get those in, and so the idea that you just keep writing the same story for like all these pages, I was a huge reader, but I didn't know that I had the discipline to do it.
Right.
So the first time I wrote a book, actually I wrote about 2/3 of it while deployed to Korean village near Rupa. So it was when I was with the first team. And what I actually discovered is it's way easier to write a novel. I mean, it takes a little longer, obviously, not much longer if you write with Brian, but it's really easy because in a short story, you have to condense all of this character development and interesting arc into 6,000 words.
Right.
The luxury of having, at times, I will admit, 120,000 words, because we can be a little wordy in rough drafts, to tell the story is it's liberating. It's so easy. And so I found that was, I guess, in 2004 or so that I wrote the first book. And after that, I've written mostly novel-length stuff. So.
And Brian, what about you? What about the writing, and how did you get into it?
So there's, as you guys all know, we talk about military experience. It's like long periods of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror, right? So it's like there's those long periods of waiting, especially in the submarine, you're on station and you're just rigged for quiet. You're being quiet, and a lot of times, especially if you're on watching the engine room, they might not change the bell the whole watch. I mean, you just might be. So I would. And as engineering officer watch, I would tell stories to at least the maneuvering watch section to pass the time, and I remember the guys after a while, they're like, "You're a pretty good storyteller. You ever thought about writing a book?" And I was like, "Nope, never thought of it." But that sort of stuck with me. That put that little bug in my ear,
Yeah.
you know. And then later when I got out, I was like, "Oh, there's so many interesting things to tell stories about." And I tell this to Jeff, like, one of my favorite things when I was in the military, when I had time to myself, was to read, you know, this type of stuff. You know, I liked Michael Crichton was one of my favorites.
Yeah,
You know, I love that stuff. And there's nothing really more satisfying than going to a great movie or reading a great book and somebody just told you an amazing story and you can't stop thinking about it. You know, like
Right.
that is a really impactful feeling where it changes the way you look at the world because you read that book. You cannot see the world the way you saw it before. And I just thought, if I could do that, if I could tell a story that left somebody feeling either really entertained or changed the way they thought, that would be cool. You know, that would be cool. So that's kind of why I started doing it.
That's fascinating. When you would tell stories, like what kind of stories would you tell them? Were you just making them up on the spot, or were they?
Oh no,
stories
they
from
were
your past?
they were stories.
They were real stories.
Yeah,
stories
like
and stuff?
yeah, you know, it'd be like I went to this podcast, I met these guys, you know, we
Okay,
you know.
yeah.
But a lot of it was just like stories from jackassery that people did, you know, in either underwear and port calls and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
You would tell stories and be humorous, you know.
All right, guys. You want to wind it down? Like, give them like 5 more minutes, and then we'll.
Yeah, sounds good.
And if anyone has any questions they want to get in there before we call it a day.
Can I throw out a little plug?
Of course, we
Please.
So we have a fantastic voice actor who performs all these books on Audible. So every single one of these novels is also an audiobook, and his name is Ray Porter. And each one of these books is available on if you have Audible, you can get it and listen to it on your phone. But also, if you have a Kindle and you like digital books, there is a function, it's very inexpensive actually, so you can pay $1.99 and you can add the audio to your Kindle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so like it might cost you, this is a little cheap, it might cost you, you know, $10.99 to buy the paperback or, you know, $14.99 to buy the audiobook. But if you buy the Kindle version of our books, you can add the audio for $1.99. You get it cheaper than either one of those formats doing it that way.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because the Kindle book's like $6,
Right.
and then it's $2 to add the audio.
Yeah.
So even if you don't read the Kindle, you just got the audio for $8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Or
fantastic.
sometimes these books go on sale for 99 cents on Kindle. Now you get the audio. You can still add it for $1.99.
Yeah.
So I'm losing money by telling you this,
Yeah.
but if you wait till it's on sale, you can get it for $3.
Well, you guys still, like, because you are on Prime, and you guys, or at least I know, like, Tier 1 is, like, you guys still get paid when somebody reads your
Yeah.
book through Prime, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's still as an author? Yeah.
Yeah, if you get the books through the Kindle Lending Library, we get paid, you know, quarters of percentage of a penny or whatever for every page that people read.
So everybody download Tier 1, download each book, and even if you don't read it, flip through it, you know, hook these guys up. No, read the books. Read the books.
Let's hold these up one more time so people who are watching it can actually see. And you know, one day when I'm not lazy, I'll get one of the other cameras going so that people can see the tabletop. But this is it. This is the Tier 1 series. What are we? We're holding up 5 books so far, and number 6 is on the way.
Yeah.
Well, and a new series, a spin-off series, Sons of War.
Coming in 2021.
Yeah. Where did your inspiration, real quick, where did your inspiration from Ember, of Fort Ember come from? Just
That's a good one.
So Ember is completely fictitious because we wouldn't want to put anyone in jeopardy. But, you know, we live in a whole new universe now, right? Mm-hmm. There's all these joint this and joint that.
It's a lot. What can you do?
Interagency. And so the inspiration for Ember was these small task forces that all of us have run across, you know, downrange or in CONUS, and suddenly these guys show up and they're all named Jones and Smith, and you know, and so these were groups that we crossed paths with, and so we took it took this and fictionalized it for Ember.
And it gives us a nice way to manage OPSEC, right? So this is a fictionalized task force.
Right.
They get to do what they want to do in our stories.
And sometimes they do the things we wish could have been done. Right.
You don't have to feel obligated to like be accurate.
Right.
Right.
It's right. It's fiction. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe the same team that does mountain ops doesn't do subsurface ops, but if it's a fictional task force, we give a shit. They do whatever you want them to do.
Right. Well, every now and then we'll run into someone. I've had this happen 2 or 3 times where they're like, I don't know that you guys should be writing some of this stuff. It's like, dude, it's a novel. There does happen to be a guy named John Dempsey, but he's a friend of ours.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all made up. Like, it's just a story, dude. It's going to be okay.
Pump your brakes.
Yeah, pump your brakes. Exactly.
All right. Someone had a good question here. What was the worst punishment you guys got, all of you? Who wants to start?
Punishment.
Like in the military, I guess.
My answer is boring. I didn't have a punishment.
Like the rest of you, I've never done anything wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, if in order to get a punishment, you'd have to.
You guys are either lying
or get caught.
Or get caught. Or get caught.
You guys.
So it sounds like it's just you, Jack.
When I was a private, I did not have a cell phone initially, so I'm living in the barracks, and the battalion did a recall. They did a RF1 recall. And it wasn't because they were getting deployed to combat, so like in Ranger Battalion, it's when you're on RF1, it's like they say 18 hours to wheels up. They recall the entire battalion and rapidly deploy them overseas. So that battalion that is on standby like that, they are there for global contingency operations if something pops off somewhere. So PV2, Jack Murphy, was out on the town, and I didn't have any idea that we got recalled. And it wasn't because we were going to get deployed overseas. It was because guys were fucking up and getting DUIs and stuff like that. So they did a recall of the entire battalion to discipline them and just do a smoke fest, right? I had no idea. I came walking back like 3 hours into the formation, and I'm like looking over like, oh shit. So like I run through and grab throw on my uniform real quick, come running out there, and they're all like, run Murphy, run. I start getting chased around the company formation, and they're chasing me, and then they're telling me, jump. So I'm like having to jump like Mario, like as high as I can as I'm running around the company formation, and there's other guys breaking ranks out of the platoon formations and chasing after me to like run me down and kick my ass. Like squad leaders are coming and like grabbing these privates and pulling them back into the formation, having me run in circles around. And finally they finish with that. We get up to the the squad AOs, and Corporal has me get on my RBA. This is an old school body armor. Like the guys wore this shit in Somalia. It's like that body armor. Yeah. Like had me doing jumping jacks and like elevated push-ups and like flutter kicks in a puddle of my own sweat. And like that probably went on for like 6 hours or some shit like that until my platoon sergeant was like, stop it, he's gonna die. And in the end, I just got a summarized Article 15 for that, and life moved on.
Yeah.
But that was probably the worst punishment I ever received. Not so much the administrative punishment; it was more the flutter kicks in a puddle of on sweat. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
It wasn't good. But
no, it's good because it was you.
Yeah. I would not call it good. It was a punishment, though. I wasn't late for formation again.
I bet.
You got a cell phone.
And I bet you got a cell phone.
Yeah, that too.
I mean, you always got smoked for different stuff. I think one of the most ridiculous, ridiculous, but I remember in Marine boot camp, our platoon had messed up doing something or other, and we had to take our footlockers out to the grinder, out to the parade field, and do manual of arms with our footlockers. Yeah.
So what did you do to earn that?
I don't know. Whatever young dumb Marine recruits do, I mean, it wasn't me. I was always an angel.
Right.
You just were participating for morale.
I was exactly. It was a team effort.
All right, last question. Best adversary and allied subs, and your take on the supposed narco sub that crossed the Atlantic recently.
So we had to do We did some sub on sub with the Japanese diesels.
Interesting.
And they were, diesel submarines are very, very quiet. When they're on their batteries and they're cruising around at 4 knots. Yeah. And the Japanese are pretty methodical about eliminating all their sound vulnerabilities. They're on it. So yeah, we went out, we did some exercises with them, and yeah, we couldn't find them most of the time.
Really?
Yeah.
So on so.
Yeah.
Bad guys, adversaries, were the Russians pretty good?
I'll talk to you about that offline.
One ping only.
And the narco sub that crossed the Atlantic to Spain, supposedly it's the first time that ever happened. Do you see that in the news?
No, don't know anything about it.
Oh yeah, it's most of those narco subs come up from the Pacific side of Colombia and land in Mexico. They offload the drugs there. But apparently one went from Colombia across the Atlantic to Spain.
Wow.
Just recently.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah. No, everybody like.
It was just an upside down bathtub.
There.
Guy fluttered down.
Yeah.
So that's
Turbo propulsion.
Right, that's
Yeah.
what makes it really impressive, actually.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's it. We're not going to take any more questions, but thank you guys for chiming in there. Anything else that we failed to cover? I mean, we went.
Did you want to try to do an extra segment?
Yeah, I
Do you
would.
want- do you wanna-
If you guys have a few minutes, I know I've kept you quite a while.
Do you want to pitch that now or?
Sure, why not? I mean, we are going to do a exclusive video for our supporters that we'll record and we'll upload later on. So yeah, what do you guys want to talk about on that?
Yeah, let's talk about. We'll give some of the super secret squirrel insights into getting published. So if there's any aspiring authors out there, we'll talk a little bit more about maybe what it takes to get that manuscript out there in the market. Yeah,
I could use those tips as well. Thank you. Absolutely. All right, guys. So thank you, Dave. You got anything?
No, thanks, yes. Brian Andrews and Jeff Wilson.
Yep.
And thanks, guys, for joining us. Please remember to subscribe to our channel. Hit that little bell notification if you want to help us pay our rent. We're about halfway to being self-sufficient. You can find our Patreon link in the description below. And make sure you check out the Tier 1 series by Andrews and Wilson, and also their new books. When is Sons of War coming out?
Sons of War is 2021.
2021.
So a bit of a wait on that one, but these are all available now on Amazon or Audible.
Yeah, and Amazon, and Kindle. So for those of you who have your phones with you all the time, don't waste that time. Read.
Yeah. I hope we can have you guys back on when the new book comes out.
Anytime.
That'd be great.
Happy to come anytime.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.